Hello, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Thomas,
And I'm Samantha.
and this is Trans IRL.
We have a great show for you tonight, so we're not going to waste any time at the beginning. We're going to get right into it. Tonight, we're going to be talking about life transition and starting and operating a queer small business with our guest, Chris Rhodes.
Chris is a transgender advocate, social media influencer, and owner of Flavnt Streetwear, a queer apparel brand he co-founded with his twin sister, which is dedicated to giving back to the transgender and queer community. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hey.
Hey, Chris. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start things off easy. Would you like to just tell a little bit more about yourself to the audience here?
Yeah, sure. So I am a 27-year-old trans guy, originally from San Antonio, Texas, but now I live in Austin. I'm an identical twin. Y'all mentioned that I run Flaunt with my twin sister. Her name's Courtney. She's a lesbian. And so Flaunt is like really good at helping the LGBTQ community because we're both one of those letters in LGBTQIA. But so, yeah, Flaunt's my day job, and I'm also like a social media influencer, trying to break into doing that a little bit more full time because I have this large platform. So if I could use some of that to make a little bit of money here and there and create content that I care about and that people who follow me care about, that'd be really cool. So I've been sharing my journey online since like the days when Tumblr was cool. So since the beginning of my transition, I started my physical transition in 2000 and what year is it now? 2019, 2015. So I'm like 4 years on T. I've had top surgery, and that's where I'm at. I don't know if I hit all the things.
I think you did, yeah. I mean, and it's probably a good place to start is right where you kind of rounded things out with your transition and your coming out process. I mean, what did that look like for you?
So I originally came out as a lesbian when I was 18, a week before my twin sister came out as a lesbian. And so I was out as a lesbian throughout college. And then around age 19, I realized that there was something more going on there with my gender identity. And so I did a lot of like research on YouTube and Google and Tumblr and blogs and everywhere, and things started to like add up and make a lot more sense. So on my 21st birthday, I accidentally came out to my mom while in Vegas, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody. Don't do that on your 21st birthday in a casino bathroom. And then I didn't start testosterone for about another year. And that was while I lived in New York City. So that was easier, I think, for me to transition and come out because my mom was a little bit adverse to my transition at first, and now she's come full circle, but it took a little while. So it was nice for me to be about 2,000 miles away and be able to like feel like I was making my choices for me instead of just the people around me. So yeah, that's how I came out. And then did I answer it? I'm sorry, I just feel like I ramble. If I get off topic, I feel like reel me back in.
I know the feeling. Like when someone asks me the like coming out question, I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I begin? Like this happened and this happened and these people. Right. But yeah, I totally feel where you're coming from. I mean, in terms of like, there's all the family dynamics and friends and just processing. Like you mentioned, like searching on Tumblr and YouTube and everywhere for all the information. I mean, I'm wondering, when did you start like your platform, like in Instagram? Like for me, I kind of started my Instagram page right around like, or slightly before I came out. And I kind of had that community building and growing around me the whole time that I was kind of coming out to other people in my life. Was your journey similar, or how did you find your ways in the queer social media world?
So I've touched on this a few times because like I kind of went about things slightly like, I want to say bizarrely, but I don't want to like say that it was like weird or anything, because it's totally valid any way you want to do something. But I had a bigger platform on Tumblr before Instagram kind of started becoming like it social media, which it is now. And on Tumblr, I made a separate like profile for myself as Chris, like before I came out to anyone in my life. So I kind of developed this online community that knew me as Chris, and like I got to feel out how that felt, like identifying that way and being spoken to as Chris and that sort of thing. And so I think some people, like, once I had an Instagram throughout that, but it wasn't nearly what the platform that I have now is. But a lot of people that followed me on Instagram were from Tumblr. So I feel like there wasn't a whole big coming out process that had to happen. And I feel like the majority of people that followed me were already like within the queer community, because I was out as a lesbian and my twin sister's a lesbian, and like everyone in our community was like some sort of queer. So it wasn't that hard to feel like I needed to seek out anything particular on Instagram or anything. It just kind of developed around me. And then my platform like really started to grow a lot more once I had top surgery. And I think a lot of that comes hand in hand with people kind of enjoy that the shock factor of before and after photos. I think we've all seen the certain types of photos that like trend on Instagram. So I'm not thankful for like getting that reach and following from that sort of stuff, but definitely after top surgery, people are drawn to that, the people that wouldn't necessarily be on your page to begin with. So I think definitely like Transformation Tuesdays brought a lot of people in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a fan of the Transformation Tuesday posts.
Yeah.
I've done a couple, just a couple.
Yeah. I mean, we all
but, yeah, I do. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about your sister, though. I think that's a really unique situation that you're in. You have an identical twin. I am curious how your relationship with your sister, how close you were with her growing up, and how that relationship was affected after you came out as trans.
So me and Courtney are identical, and we shared a room until we were 19. So all the way growing up, our first dorm room and our first apartment was the first time we had a separate room. We were the same major in college, played the same sports, scored 10 points apart on the SAT, like super identical. Like some people, when they say they're identical, are not like actually like to a T. And for some reason, me and Courtney are like carbon copies of one another. And so like when I came out as a lesbian, it like made so much sense that also then she came out. But then when I came out as trans, she actually had a pretty hard time with it at first, because it was the first thing that we didn't agree about. We always like were on the same page. And so there was a lot of confusion surrounding that. And then also she told me like later on that she sort of beat herself up about how could this person that was her best friend and like who had been in the same room as her whole life and had like we'd been like attached at the hip, how could she have not, like she beat herself up about like how did she not know that like I was trans? And I was like, well, I didn't know until I was like 19, so like how would you know? But so there was definitely some like learning curve there. And at first she kind of was really adverse, but I think it maybe took her all of like 48 hours. Like she was like adamantly like, no, this isn't like the right thing for you. And then like very quickly turned around and was like, who am I to decide like what's right for you? I'm just here to be like your person, like I have been your whole life. And then now she's like the world's biggest advocate for me and like all of my trans friends, and obviously helps me like run this brand that like gives back to the trans community, just because like she's seen like firsthand like what I've gone through and like wants to help and give back. And she's just like a super, super great person and supporter of just, I feel like, all of my trans friends. And she's just really great. She's actually like the person that came up with the idea for our bearskin binders. Like she's not even the trans person in this partnership, and she was the one that masterminded that. So yeah, coming out, it changed our dynamic a little bit in that like now when we meet people, we either get that we look exactly alike and people are confused, or people don't understand how we're twins at all or related. They don't see it at all. But then when we tell them that we're identical, we get the like, well, you can't be identical. That's not possible because you're a boy and she's a girl. And then that leads into the like, well, like it didn't really start out that way. But so it's just changed things a little bit, but like we still like identify as identical twins because that's like genetically what we are. And we're still like, we still live together. We run a business together. We play in multiple sports leagues together. We just have to play in the co-ed ones now. I can't play in the women's leagues, obviously. So there's been like some hard parts of my transition with us being identical, which I also think was a huge reason why it took me a while to figure out that I was trans, because my identity was so ingrained and intertwined with another human being that if I didn't see it like reflected in her, then I didn't really understand it, because for so long that was like everything that I identified with or liked or like aspired to. Like Courtney and I were just always mirror images of each other. So I think it made things kind of convoluted, but also it's just turned into this really great thing because I have this great support system. And I've had a ton of people come forward. Obviously I share my transition online, and you'd be so surprised the number of people that like DM me or message me or comment that are like, oh my gosh, I have a twin sister too. And like, I didn't realize there was so many like trans people with like twin siblings out there who didn't transition. So yeah, there's a lot more people out there in that same scenario. And I think that that's part of why I kind of share it, because I think that like I was in this like headspace of like, we were so much alike. And I think that's like a twin thing, but also like, it's hard enough to figure yourself out if you're without like someone else so much like you, and like your family always treats you as like a unit, and like people like you have all the same friends and all the same basically expectations. And then if you want to like stray from that, you kind of like question yourself doubly. So like, am I doing the right thing if like my person's not doing the exact same thing? But it's been mostly good. I think that I was very lucky to have this like amazing sibling and like lifelong best friend that I've had.
Yeah, I think it's a really unique perspective. Not many people have someone that close to them when they transition, especially someone they grew up with that closely. I am curious what it's like now to run a business with your sister.
There's really good days and there's really bad days. I mean, like me and my sister pretty much treat each other like I think that like some married couples treat each other. Like we know that like she's like, I mean, we're like around each other so often. So we're like at once like the most kind to one another and also like the hardest on each other, because we just know what we're both capable of. And like we're just, even though we're very alike, Courtney's the dominant one of the two of us. Like there's usually a dominant twin and a more submissive twin, and Courtney's definitely more dominant and like very like keeps me on a schedule and like has a very like, I don't know, she's just very strict about things, which is so funny because like I'm like really anal and neat, but like I'm more of like a go with the flow and do things when you're creative, and like that drives her crazy. But it's really, really good that we complement each other in those ways that we are different. So Courtney right now has a 9-to-5 as a graphic designer. That's what we went to school for. And I have at one time, there's only been a period of time since Flaunt was formed of about 1.5 years that I had a day job. But besides that, Flaunt's been my full-time job. And then Courtney has had jobs on and off in between that. So she's a graphic designer here in town. So since she's at work like 9 to 5 most days, she does a lot of this stuff that's like on the computer that she can do like between work and at work, or like when she gets home. Like she does like our bookkeeping, our payroll, places orders for shirts and stuff, whereas I take on more of the like physical like labor of like printing shirts, packaging, shipping, that sort of stuff. So yeah, running a business with my sister's For me and Courtney, I feel like it works because most of the time our goals are the same. We want the same things. And we're usually on the same page, and it's something we're both really proud of and care about. And so far, I mean, sometimes you want to give up because you're a small business, but luckily, like, it's easier when you're running it with someone. I think if I ran it by myself, there would be times where I wouldn't be able to like push through when it's difficult. But I think having a partner when you're running a small business is like really important, because like as long as you're both not wanting to quit at the same time, then like you'll probably keep running the business.
Yeah. So let's dig into Flaunt a little more then. What was your inspiration and motivation when you first started the company, when you first sort of jumped in?
So Flaunt was actually born at Austin Pride in 2013. I made myself a shirt with a stencil and spray paint that said Pretty Boy. And I went to Pride and I had like dozens and dozens and dozens of people coming up to me asking me where the shirt was from. And this was pre-transition me that lived in a very androgynous, like wasn't really embracing lesbian as an identity, but wasn't quite through the trans threshold over here. So I was very much identifying as like Pretty Boy was like my thing. And then I realized that, oh, like all these other people identify with this term or this like identity, or just even just this shirt. Like maybe it's not that deep, but it was like lesbians and trans guys and gay guys and straight guys and everyone. Me and Courtney kind of just like looked at each other and we're like, oh, like, should we like make t-shirts? We like learned to screen print when we were in college. We made shirts before the Obama-Romney election to try to gauge how the votes were gonna go. Like we made shirts for like our rugby teams and Harry Potter premieres and like stuff like that, super nerdy. But so we knew how to make shirts, and we were like, oh, well, maybe this could be a practical way to like apply our graphic design like skills in a way that like our friends would like to buy these. And like, I don't know that we thought like people all across like the world would end up buying them. But so the Pretty Boy shirt was the initial idea. And then about 4 months later, $500 and one order to a local screen printing shop got us our first run of shirts. Mostly our friends bought them at first, but we were lucky to be in a time of Instagram and other social media. So just certain pictures got a little bit of like momentum online. That's free advertising. And people started to like what we were doing. And by the time that Flaunt was like 6 months old, we decided that we wanted it to mean something more than just cool t-shirts, even if it was shirts that I mean, they were cool. There was more than cool t-shirts because they were made by queer people for queer people, and like had these, well, at the time, just a Pretty Boy shirt, but like something that queer people could maybe identify with and see people that looked like them modeling it. But we wanted to create something that somehow gave back. So we're in this like day and age of millennials really liking to buy things that are for a cause. And we know how well things like Tom's shoes do by giving back. And we had seen a few people, you know, like Aiden Dowling had done like selling shirts for like his own top surgery, and then started doing like a scholarship fund for people fundraising for surgeries. And so we wanted to do something similar to that, but not the same. So we decided to partner with just individuals. And we thought that this was kind of important because a lot of trans people, when they're transitioning, don't necessarily have the support of maybe their family or even the community. So the idea of all of our customers being able to get behind one campaign at a time and like lift up this one individual felt like it could be really essential to certain trans people. And yeah, our fundraisers are open to any person who's seeking gender affirming surgery, as long as they're over the age of 18, just because as of right now, we don't want to have to deal with minors and parents. It's just very complicated legally. And we're on our 12th partnership. We've partnered with 10 trans masculine people, one of which identified as non-binary, but all on the trans masculine spectrum, and then 2 trans feminine people. And we've done 9 top surgeries, 1 phalloplasty, and 1 breast augmentation. And this is our 2nd breast augmentation that we're fundraising for. In the last 5 years, I think we're at like $22,000 for those partnerships. So that was a pretty long rundown of Flaunt, but
No, I think that's a really incredible thing that you're doing. It's, part of your corporate culture, your business culture there, and supporting the queer community. And I think that's so important that for a company that, associates very closely with the queer community, that you're, paying back to it or supporting it. It's not something we see everywhere. And I think it's very commendable. And it's something that, I keep in mind when I work with other businesses. I think that's a really great thing. I think it's amazing what you're doing.
No, thank you.
It is amazing. So, Chris, you mentioned that Courtney actually came up with the design for your bearskin binder. You want to talk a little bit more about that design and what kind of inspired you both to walk down that road with the bearskin binder and begin that journey?
So we live in Texas, and we used to go to the lake. Like, my parents had a lake house for most of my life, and we would spend weekends just out on the lake swimming. And Courtney just, I guess, picked up on, before even I really picked up on, that like me and my other like trans friends / just some of our like masculine of center, more masculine presenting androgynous friends like don't have anything to wear sometimes, especially if you're a chest binding person in the summertime. And I was like small chested, so I would wear maybe like a sports bra or like KT tape or whatever. But Courtney just looked at me like one summer when I was wearing like a black Nike sports bra, and she knew that I like wore a binder day to day. And she said to me, which at the time this was like 2014, I guess, or 2015 maybe. I have to remember what year we did our Kickstarter, but I think it was 2015. But she looked at me and she said, "Why aren't binders made in skin tones?" And I was like, "Why aren't binders made in skin tones?" Like, there was like one company out at the time, Underworks, which made one skin tone, which we all know, like the dilemma of like, Band-Aids are only made in white people's skin tone. And like, there was just like this like one peach colored Underworks binder that like there was no range of binders that like fit multiple people and multiple identities and multiple skin colors. And I was like, wow, like that's a hole in the market. And like, she was looking at it as like, oh, you could like look shirtless from afar. And I looked back at her like, well, binders are supposed to be subtle anyway. So if it was skin tone and blended in with you more, you could wear it under more clothing, or like it wouldn't be as noticeable if like you could see the strap of it slightly, or like if you're wearing a light thin shirt. So we kind of both met in the middle on this idea of hers that we should make this skin tone binder. But then she asked me, because she didn't wear binders, like, well, if we're going to change something, like what else do you want to change about the binders you're currently wearing? So for me, I live in Texas and it's hot here 9 months of the year. So I was like, I want thinner straps so I can wear tank tops, and I want a slightly lower neckline so that like I can maybe wear my top button unbuttoned on a shirt and not see this crew neck like coming way up high near my collarbones or whatever. And then we both were like, well, we've been athletes our whole life. Why wouldn't you put a racer back on something to make it more comfortable for a range of motion? And people are out there wearing these binders doing activities they shouldn't anyway, but make it more comfortable for them. Like if you're lifting things at work, or if you're just an active person or walking around. So we just put together all of these things we thought we should change about binders. We went to my mom, who very dumbly at one point in our lives told us she could sew. So we made her make us some prototypes. And so she made us the first prototypes that I then wore at the lake to see if it worked. My friend Caleb wore a different one because we have slightly different body types, just to see how it would work. We sent like a prototype to one of my other trans friends who was a larger chested so that we could see if it worked on a different chest. And then we were like, oh, this is cool. Maybe we should find a way to raise money to make this a reality, because it costs a lot of money to manufacture something. So we decided to do a Kickstarter, which was the most stressful 30 days of my life. And I would never recommend Kickstarter or any crowdfunding to anyone unless you just are ready to be panicked for 30 days. But it ended up being great because we raised the money for our first round of production. Our goal was $25,000. We ended up raising about $26,000, which allowed us to produce our first range of binders, which was from size extra small to extra large in 4 colors, which now we have extra, extra small to extra, extra large in 5 colors. But so Courtney came up with the idea, saw a hole in the market. I piggybacked off that idea, wanted to change some things while we were already in there redesigning, made some prototypes, made a Kickstarter campaign, somehow sold the idea to 700 people that helped back it and make it a reality. And now we've had them on the market for, I think, almost 3 years now. We're in between manufacturers because we just weren't getting the volume that we needed from our current manufacturer, and we were having a few issues with stitches popping, and just production cost was a little bit high. So right now we're trying to fix some of that and get them back on the shelves because they've just been unavailable since about, I think, last August. But when they've been in stock, they usually sell out within the first 48 hours. They're really in high demand. And I'd say that at least 90% of our feedback on them has been pretty positive, which I think is good. Anytime you're creating something, especially an undergarment, I mean, it's hard to make something that everybody likes, but it's been mostly positive. So we're really proud of it. I mean, I feel like it was a really cool product. At the time that we did the Kickstarter, other brands didn't have, like I said, multiple color options. And in the time it took us to finally get them out on the market, another binder company did roll out some, but that's the nature of making a product. So, but I mean, so far so good. It's really, I mean, I'm very much a designer, creative person. The back end part of business is all learned through trial and error. So if anyone runs a small business and has it all together, I envy them because we're just learning things as we go.
Oh man, that actually perfectly segues into my next question, which is, what are some things you wish you would have known when you first started off Flaunt? Thinking back and on your, day-to-day adventures or misadventures, what sort of things do you wish you would have known?
Oh, I have some really dumb ones. First of all, for the first 2 years, I just guessed how much our packages weighed. Do you know how much money we wasted on postage? Because I was like, I think this is a pound. Get a postal scale, weigh them actually, because it is just not that hard. I don't know why it took us so long to do that. Also, get a label printer. We just got one in the last year. It makes life so much easier. Silly things like that. When I lived in New York, I used to walk a mile to the post office. Google if there's postal stores nearby, like USPS, but just where you can drop off post office packages, or UPS or FedEx. There happened to be one 2 blocks from my house in Brooklyn that I found out after months of walking a mile. Things like that. There's easy business things that you can figure out. I mean, we were kind of silly about our first 2 partnerships. We gave 15% of our entire sale. And I mean, it is of our sales, but it wasn't of just the profit. So that's just not a smart thing as a business, because you're not making, we weren't deducting what it cost us for the shirts. So that was something we learned. Always have a contract, always. Even if it's, I mean, I think as a business owner, I should probably tell you to actually get a lawyer to do it. But as long as you have something written down with both people agreeing to it, then you can cite back to that, just because we didn't have any sort of agreement for our first few partnerships. And luckily, all but one of them went spectacularly. But had they gone poorly, you need people all on the same page. I mean, even when I just do a sponsored post on Instagram, I sign something. So just make sure you're being legit. I don't know. I mean, those are all probably really self-explanatory business things that these 2 art students were we'll just make t-shirts. But
No, that's
yeah,
some great advice in there. I think that's all important things you've touched on and things you learn along the way, right?
yeah,
There's no, I mean, sometimes that's the best way to learn, as long as you're not losing too much money.
yeah.
But Flaunt is now in its 5th year, right? This is your 5th year. You're founded in 2014 originally. I am curious, what your next 5 years looks like. What's your plans for the company as it continues to grow?
Well, eventually one day we would love to have a storefront. I mean, that would be the dream. We would love for it to be in Austin. Austin is this kind of queer little mecca in the South that happens to be pretty liberal. I mean, it's still in Texas. There's still lots of crap going on here, but it's a pretty great place. I feel like the LGBT community here is pretty thriving and there's a lot of good things happening. So we think this would be an awesome spot to have eventually some sort of brick and mortar storefront. Me and Courtney's actual like a little bit of a dream is to like have a multi-purpose sort of storefront where like maybe the front is like a coffee shop to be like, a space where like queer people could come hang out, and it could be like not just a bar, because we know that there's not a lot of queer spaces that aren't centered around alcohol. So if it was maybe like up front a coffee shop and then the back was like our storefront, and it could be like a cool space for like small events and like display art done by queer and trans artists, and like just be like something that could feel a little bit like home to queer people. But like that would definitely be like the coolest thing in the whole world. Besides that, I mean, probably sooner than that, we would love to get a space that wasn't just this like, right now we print in like this studio behind our house, which like we're lucky enough to have found this house on the east side of Austin that has what isn't really a detached garage. I don't know what it could be used for besides like storage. My dad's an electrician, so he rigged the electricity to work out there. So now we have an AC unit, and that's where I print. But eventually we'd like a space bigger than that so we could get a multicolor press so we could do more intricate designs. Right now we're pretty limited as like, one color ink on a shirt. Anything that's multicolor, we have to drop ship, and that's just like limits amount of profit you can make on those items. And also we like to be really hands-on. It's fun. Eventually, maybe one day, someone who wasn't me would print the stuff. But I mean, I really enjoy actually printing shirts. But we'd love to be able to like pay some interns to want to learn how to run a clothing line or whatever. As a person who's done creative internships for free in places like Brooklyn, which is really expensive to live, I would love to not do unpaid internships. But we would love to be able to employ other people or just be able to have people come in and work with us and learn from us. So yeah, I just want Flaunt to grow. We want to obviously keep expanding the binders. Right now, I think we're tackling some of the issues with manufacturing that we had before. But once we get that nailed down, hopefully get manufacturing running smoothly, we want to keep expanding sizes. At minimum, get up to a 3X. And then we can always add more colors in between so we can be more inclusive. So things like that. Yeah, one day maybe have stuff besides just t-shirts. I mean, there's all sorts of like, I mean, I rep for Ashenery, which is a brand for like shorter guys, but like, what about like shorter guys with wider hips? I know there's certain brands that like, make button-ups or make like nicer clothes that aren't just tees like for like different body types, but it'd be pretty cool to one day like have our own like label of clothes. Like, I mean, we are our own brand, but like actually from scratch have a say in how the sizing goes on just a basic t-shirt, or maybe like shorts and boxers, or maybe button-ups one day. Who knows? I mean, it'd be really cool to just keep catering to this community that I think gets overlooked a lot when it comes to clothing.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I love all those things. I'm like, yes, do them all, and I will come and like clothe myself, and it'll be amazing. But we do have some more questions from the viewers tonight that we do want to get to. And I just want to say that if you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook and have a question for Chris, Samantha, or myself, put it in the chat and we'll try to answer as many as we can. But first, we have a few questions that were submitted earlier this week through Instagram. The first one is, what are the biggest challenges you face as an LGBTQ+ business owner?
Okay, So I have to find out like kind of the right way to word this one. So like bear with me a little bit if it's a bit rough. But so I have found that something that's really difficult being an LGBTQ business owner is that the people buying from us are also within the LGBTQ community. So a lot of those people are often disenfranchised, more often experiencing homelessness or like having a harder time getting jobs. Usually like we know that a lot of queer people like just by default don't maybe have as much money, or because they're transitioning have to put their money towards different things and different priorities. If they don't have the support of their family, that also can lead to like less money in their pockets to be able to support businesses. So because of that, the people we tend to sell to a lot of times kind of will question how much, question maybe the pricing of things, be adverse to spending money on things. People live in this culture that's used to Amazon, where you can buy anything for $2 and get free shipping. Everything we make is made in the States. It's all ethically sourced. It's all printed by hand. So the cost of those sort of products is going to be more. 15% of those sales goes towards helping someone. So the cost is going to be slightly more than buying a shirt from somewhere that mass produces and has the capabilities like an Old Navy or an American Eagle, which actually our t-shirts are probably cheaper than like an American Eagle. But getting people to understand what goes into making a shirt, and then being willing to spend the money on that, and also understand that queer people should be allowed to make money. We run a business. Me and my sister are both obviously in the queer community, and people should not be, I think, made to feel bad for trying to be successful and running a business and profiting. Like at the end of the day, we all want to have a roof over our heads, and obviously like I want to give back and do good, and I want my ways of making a living to mean more than just making money. But also, I mean, I do want to be able to like feed myself and do the things that I want to do. So I think supporting queer people that own businesses is important. And it's kind of hard when you're in this group that can be a little bit critical of spending money and not realizing that you are doing other queer people a disservice by not expecting that they should be able to thrive and succeed, even if it is through some sort of consumerism. Hopefully it's an educated, good consumerism that is, I don't know, helping people.
I think it's a tough balance, but I think that the work that you're doing with your partnership program shows your commitment to the community. I think that's important. Mm-hmm. So I do have another question here. This is short and sweet, but are you hiring? Is our next viewer question here.
Right now we're not, but like I said, that's something that's like on our on the horizon, and we would love to be able to, especially if people are local, we'd love to be able to get a helping hand now and again, printing or packaging. And then also, I mean, eventually, right now, we're not hiring, but we do have people that are able to come on as ambassadors and reps. And we've been divvying out, I mean, we have a sort of a program where like certain people can be like a rep lead. So you can kind of like help be in charge and making sure people are like posting, and you can have some sort of responsibility. We did bring on our friend Drew, who does some of our customer service emails, which was helpful when Courtney went back full time to work. So we have expanded our team from just me and Courtney to Drew helps with customer service emails. The girlfriends get roped into helping package, unpaid, but paid with love. And, but yes, hopefully eventually we will be able to hire people. We do get that question kind of often. I would love to be able to like say yes, but I want to be able to pay people fairly. So one day.
Yes, one day. Yeah. So we have one more viewer question that's already been submitted, and I'm thinking we maybe should have asked this to Courtney, given what you've told us, but any tips for managing your time and priorities?
Oh yeah, Courtney's gonna be like, why did you ask us that? Oh, I mean, I make lists, but I also make lists to ignore my lists. It's just a bad thing. But I think that if you could narrow it down to things that, one, are important to you, two, that make you happy, and three, are going to help you get where you want to go, figure out which things in your day you want to put the most time towards. And there's time in your day for most things if you set your mind to it. So you just got to carve that time out. It can be hard. I mean, there was times when I was working a 9 to 5, I would come home and I would print from 7 to 10. I would package from 10 until 1. I'd go to sleep and I'd do it all over again. And that's part of why I left my job, and I make a lot less money because I don't have a 9 to 5 salary. But I was getting to a point where I was burnt out on everything, and I would rather be able to put my time into something and not feel like I was resenting the stuff that I'm passionate about. So for me, it was finding a balance of doing what makes me happy, but not doing things to an extent that I was burning myself out, and trying to implement good habits, trying to get up earlier. I'm not a morning person. Trying to find the time that I can do certain things. I mean, social media, like my girlfriend happens to be in social media, so like it's easy for us to sit down and create content together or like edit photos together. But when I have to sit down and do packaging or whatever, I try to make sure that that's on a day that can't be spent on a like elsewhere, better. But I guess mostly it's just figure out which things are most important and make the time for them, and just make it a routine. If you do something enough, it'll become pretty natural. Build a habit out of it, and maybe get a business partner that will make you do it. That's good for keeping your priorities.
Your advice is have a twin.
Always helpful. Yeah, I need a twin. Where do I get a twin? All right, so we are also taking questions live in our YouTube and Facebook live streams here. We do have one question that came in from the chat so far. And the question is, when it comes to business partnerships, have you ever run into a situation where you were treated poorly because you are representing an LGBTQ company?
I mean, besides like, I don't think that this really would count. Like, besides like the internet troll here and there, no, not really, because we pretty much operate within and cater to like the audience that we're always dealing with. So we're kind of like lucky in that sense. I mean, we don't tend to like go vend at an event that's like also like doubling as like a Trump rally, or like we just aren't really in those spaces. I can't even really think of a time that we've had any sort of like negative reaction because we are a queer brand. No, which is very lucky. I mean, besides on the internet, but like you'll find anybody on the internet that wants to hate on something. But so far, no, we haven't done, I mean, everything's been like out of our own pockets and not really seeking, and besides Kickstarter also, but we haven't really done any like seeking investors or that sort of thing. So, I mean, I think if we were more out there in more business dealings, that could be a topic of like contention. But for us, we really haven't been in those like very like professional corporate arenas or somewhere that I feel like we would get that sort of negative feedback, luckily.
That's good so far. No, I think that.
Yeah.
So that is the extent of our questions here tonight. So I want to say thank you so much for giving up some of your evening to talk a little bit about your business. I think that you're doing out there, and wish you best.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I'm actually going to ask you to hold on tight for just a moment, because I do want to take a second here to talk about next week's show. Next week, our guest will be Ari Dennis. And Ari is a parent of 2 who identifies as non-binary and has gotten a lot of attention for how they're raising their youngest child, Sparrow.
That's right. Ari is raising Sparrow using they, them pronouns. The idea is that doing so will allow them to explore their gender identity without pressure or bias, and then when they're ready, they'll articulate their gender.
I think it's going to be a great interview. So we hope that you join us back here next Thursday, same time, same place, 7:30 p.m. Pacific, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube and Facebook.
And before we go, if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Trans IRL. All of our past episodes are available there. We're also on Facebook as Trans IRL Show and Instagram at Trans IRL, where we just passed 3,000 followers this week. So thank you so much. Be sure to like us and follow us on all those places.
All right. I'd like to thank Chris again for joining us here on the show tonight. This is a really enlightening conversation about what it's like to run a small business. And again, I'm just so thrilled with what you've done with the community and the support that you've provided back to your people you're working your partnerships with.
No, thank you. Thanks so much.
Yes, it was so fun. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris. It was a true pleasure to chat with you tonight.
All right.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks, Chris. And thanks, Addison, for running our show. Until next week, this has been Trans IRL. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.